Welcome to the Serial Talker Podcast. I'm Peter von Gomm, and today we have a very special edition of the podcast. There will be no true stories, but we have a very truly interesting guest on the show. Her name is Vicki Glass, and she is a sommelier in Napa Valley. Napa, of course, is one of the top wine-producing regions in the world. Billions of gallons of wine are drunk every year around the world, but most of us don't really know a whole lot about wine. Now, of course, we have to give a shout out to France, Italy, Spain. I mean, the Romans, wine was a major part of their culture. Even the kids were getting lit. But Napa Valley holds its own. Our resident wine expert, Vicki the Sommelier, is going to tell us what to look for when you're at a restaurant, pairing it with different types of food. If you're buying wine at a grocery store, what to look for. Vicki has some awesome tips for us today. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast. Today we have a very exciting guest, my old friend, not old that she's old, but
no, I'm pretty
longtime
old.
friend. My longtime friend, Vicki Glass. Welcome to the show, Vicki.
Thanks, Peter. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So Vicki is a sommelier. Did I get that right? The pronunciation?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So
pretty
you're
close.
Good. So you're a sommelier in Napa Valley, and I'm really excited to talk to you because I am not a sommelier and I'm not an expert at all when it comes to wine. And there's lots that I want to know. And I think there's a lot that other people, the common wine buyer and drinker, doesn't know much about wine. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show so you can shed some light and educate us on what it means to be a sommelier and how you can dumb it down for those of us who don't know much about wine.
Oh,
Is that a tall
fabulous.
order?
Okay, let's go. I'm ready.
So what exactly what is a sommelier?
Oh, that's a good question. These days, it's all over the map. It means you have credentials to talk about wine, I suppose, if I could say it quite simply. You've studied, you've taken tests, and you have some sort of credentials that allow you to speak about wine.
Okay.
That's how I'm going to define it right now.
Okay.
So as for me, I studied in France, and I took a French test, and I got some qualifications there, and then I went on to the WSET program to get some qualifications that I could use in the United States.
So you said it was the test was actually 3 days long?
3 days, right. Yeah, so first day was just basically a written test about all the wine regions in France, the different kinds of wines. The second day was all service, where you have to sort of demonstrate how to serve wines and champagne, things like that. Perfectly, by the way, because it is France. And and the third day was blind tastings, where you had to guess the varietal, you had to guess the region, you had to talk about what you would pair it with, what kind of foods you would pair the wine in front of you with, and so on and so forth.
In that tasting part of the test, if you were wrong, is it game over, or is there some room for mistakes?
Well, I think if you got all of the wines wrong, I think they allow you maybe to get one wrong, perhaps. Okay. I think it was more strict with the service portion. So, for example, if there was, when I was demonstrating how to decant an old wine, if I had missed one tiny portion of that, it would have been game over for sure.
Oh, wow. And then that means the entire schooling is finished. You'd have to start over again.
Well, no, you can retake exams. You can retake the exams, but yeah, the schooling is just to prepare you for exams. That's how it works in the wine industry. You study and I went to Les Cordons Bleus in Paris, and it was a pretty intensive program. 6 days a week. It was,
Wow.
we would have anywhere from 25 to 45 wines a day that we would taste.
Oh, you poor thing.
Of course, you don't drink it; you spit it out. But
That's okay. That's why you wanted to become a sommelier.
believe me, you would get tired of it. After like the fourth or fifth, you'd say, "Oh my God, don't give me another one."
So was this class in French?
It was in French, and there was a British interpreter. So the teacher was a master sommelier, a French master sommelier, and he spoke in French. And then there was a British gentleman that interpreted everything.
Wow, amazing.
So, and the students were from all over the world. Japan, China, Finland. It was pretty interesting. It was fun, actually.
That sounds like it. It sounds like it. So once you have the credentials of a sommelier, are there different ranks? I mean, is there any necessity to go back and study more?
Well, what you'll find are there different organizations. Now, there's the famous movie Somm, which is based on the with master sommeliers, which is the Court of Master Sommeliers. That is the gold standard, basically, and quite difficult. And that's more for someone who wants to be in the restaurant industry as a somm.
Okay.
Now, for someone like me, I was more interested in the. I wanted to work for a winery. I'm really interested in wine production and wine making, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. I'm currently studying for the 2-year diploma for level 4. As a matter of fact, each country has their own standard for sommeliers. So France has their own test. Japan has their own test. I think Japan has the most sommeliers. They have the largest number of sommeliers. Yeah.
So, as you studied Cordon Bleu to become a sommelier, and does that give you a higher ranking than, for example, somebody who becomes a sommelier in America or in another country? Is France considered like the top?
Well, I mean, it's. I guess that's subjective. I went to France. I was living in Japan, as you know, and I went to France, and I actually took a really cool little course in Japan. It sort of sparked my interest, but I knew that France was the gold standard, and I decided that if I really want to learn about wine, everything about wine, I should really go to France, and I should study in France.
So I would assume that when you are looking for work at wineries or at a restaurant or whatever, they see your credentials, Cordon Bleu, sommelier. I mean, I would imagine that would open more doors. Sommelier is a French word, and it would be like, if you were becoming a sushi chef in Portland, Oregon, or studying in Tokyo to be a job over someone who. So fast forward, you studied in France, then you moved back to America, to Napa Valley, and you began working in the wine industry.
I saw a job opening for a sparkling house in Napa called Domaine Chandon. They are, the parent company is LVMH, Moet Hennessy, Louis Vuitton. And that's how I ended up in Napa the first time.
Okay.
I worked there for a season. I went back to Japan, and I got a call from Opus One Winery, which a lot of people in Japan know. It's a very famous winery. And I started I went back and I started working for Opus One Winery, and I worked there 4 or 5 years.
I see. Yeah. So what is your role when you're working for a winery as a sommelier? What is your role there? What exactly are you doing?
Well, it depends. For those wineries, you're sort of a brand ambassador. So basically, when guests come, you talk about the wine, you tour them around the winery, you talk about how the wine is made. And basically, all of these positions are sales positions when you look at it more deeply. It's you're there to not only serve the guests and treat the guests like they're the most important person in the room, but you're also there for sales.
I see. So digging a little deeper into the qualifications or the knowledge of wine, let's set a little a scenario here, because a lot of us, like I said, I think a lot of people don't know about wine. They know what tastes good. Oh, that's really nice. It tastes nice. Or, you should always drink, have a red with steak or something. So talk.
Not necessarily.
I know that sounds. I know. But that's the general. Fish should be white wine. That's as deep as my knowledge goes. So when you are, for example, let's just start it like at a grocery store. Let's say some of these grocery stores have a huge selection of wine, and where do you start? If you went into a grocery store, you're going to make some baked chicken. What would you gravitate towards? And how would you know if that was going to be a wine that you had a pretty good chance of being good?
Well, first and foremost, Peter, I have to tell you that Google is your best friend.
Okay.
What I would do if I knew nothing about wine and I knew I was having a roast chicken and I went into the wine section and there was just this massive amount of wine. I was so confused. The first thing I'd do is Google it. What pairs well with baked chicken?
Really?
And then I would look. Yeah, exactly. Google is your friend. I mean, thank God for the internet. I mean, now we don't need a Somm following us around all the time, or the stores don't even need some Somm walking around or saying, hey, well, this pairs nicely with this or that. I mean, about wine pairings,
right. It's
just really kind of, you're right about the, chicken with a white wine. However, that's a kind of basic thing. There's something we call a congruent wine pairing, although I like to say that it's sort of complementary, but we can't say complementary because the other one is called complementary, which is actually contrasting. I know it's confusing, but a congruent flavor profile would, let's say you're having a creamy sauce on that chicken or something, a white creamy sauce. And then a congruent pairing that would be complementary would be something creamy in the wine as well, to complement that. I could say maybe, a creamy Chardonnay, buttery Chardonnay or something like that. Or you can go with what they call a complementary, but it's actually contrasting pairing. And you can do something that cuts the fat from that creamy sauce, like a Sauvignon Blanc. It's a highly acidic wine, and the acid in it would cut the creaminess and the fat in there. So, it just depends on what you'd like, really.
Right. So, but what has that done? You say, I mean, you're saying that Google is your friend, but
yeah.
Is that making sommeliers obsolete?
Not really. Someone's got to write that stuff for Google.
Okay.
Yeah, and in restaurants, you're not gonna Google it at the restaurant, right? You're there, you're having a really nice meal with somebody, and the Somm is going to come and recommend what's going to go with what you ordered. Or you need Somms also to recommend wines,
Right.
I mean,
not just to review them, but to recommend.
Exactly. Right. I mean, in the case of the store, you're just walking in blindly, so there's no one to recommend. Some stores, Trader Joe's here in California, they have guys that come and recommend wine for you, so it's very nice. A lot of people go food first, and then they say, okay, this wine. What I like to do is the opposite. I think, I want to have this really nice big oaky cab tonight, so I think I'll have a nice juicy steak with whatever.
Or some food that pairs to the wine.
Right.
So if I was single and I wanted to impress my date with my wine knowledge.
Pretend you don't have any wine knowledge. That's how you can impress them.
That's not pretending at all. It's the truth. So, what's some terminology that I could use to, as I'm perhaps my date is very knowledgeable in wine, and I don't want to look like a complete idiot. So what are some things I could say to describe the wine that I'm drinking to make me look like I'm somebody special?
Well, avoid the nice legs comment, that people say when they swirl the glass, and because she might not know what you're talking about. Oh, thank you. Well, we like to say we go through stages with wine when we pour you a little bit in the glass, and then you're supposed to assess the wine and, decide how you like it. Basically, you give it a little swirl. You see how it is on the nose, basically. So you get the aromas on the nose, and you judge it that way. What you want to do is you really want to look for off-putting aromas. For example, if anything smells like musty cardboard or something like that, it could be corkiness. Wet dog is another one. That fruit, floral, those kind of aromas are always desirable. Citrus, fruit, some kind of tertiary. If you're in the case of red wine that's been aged in oak for a while, some tertiary sort of spice, depending on the barrel. Trying to keep this simple, so it's pretty hard. So, and then you would give it a taste, see what the acidity's like, the tannins, give it a swirl in your mouth. You kind of want to do this quickly at a restaurant because you want to let the guy know whether it's good or not. So he could fill the glasses. So
you talked about aging, like casked wine. So the wine is aged. There's other what do you call it, vessels that wine is stored in. I've heard of like stainless steel and concrete. That's not aging though, right?
Right, that's not aging it. So aging in the barrel is just to give the wine, first of all, ageability in your own wine cellar. You could hold on to those wines, and usually a nice cab or a Bordeaux, a cab blend, a red wine blend is done that way. It gives you not only gives the wine ageability in your wine cellar, so you could pull it out 20 years and it'll have, different aspects to it because it's been aging slowly. Right. But it gives it those tertiary flavors. It's usually done in oak. So it depends on where the oak is from as well. So the grain of that barrel is very tight. So it doesn't impart a lot of tertiary flavors, but what it does is it sort of gives it sort of mild baking spices, which is really nice. Now, if you have American oak, which has a very wide grain, American oak will give your wine a little more vanilla, less spice, so just depends.
Right. Interesting.
They use concrete and stainless steel quite often. The concrete egg was a fad there for a while because of the shape, and they said that the fermentation wouldn't get stuck because it keeps moving around. But concrete is used because it keeps the temperature pretty cool and stable. It has natural temperature stabilization. Right. So,
well, is concrete relatively inert? I mean, it's not going to produce any flavors or to that wine. It's not going to affect it in any way.
Right, exactly. Same with stainless steel. So show me how you would impress your date. From what I've told you.
Excuse me, waiter. I'd like to order your best Merlot, darling. Your long legs. I love your long legs.
I gotta go shampoo my hair.
Wait, come back. The appetizers haven't come yet. But see, that's why I was asking, because I don't know what to say.
I mean, the thing that I never liked about studying wine is this whole kind of snobbery that goes around that, it has notes of blueberries and gooseberry and this and that. And, you know, I mean, if you see the movie Somm, the one guy says something like a can of open tennis balls or something like that. I mean, freshly cut garden hose. I mean, it's all subjective. You know, you can smell anything in that. But that part of it, I mean, I went to a winery called Marcel Dice, very famous for Riesling. And Jean-Claude Dice was the grandson of the original owner. And he said something really, really amazing. And this was in front of the master Somm teacher that that we had at Lake Hornbleu.
Okay.
Don't believe this. Smells of blueberries. It's bullshit. he said, and I'll never forget. And everyone went, "Whoa, what?" Because this is what we've been learning.
Right.
He said, "It's bullshit." He said the best way to tell a good wine is if you salivate after having it. Everybody salivates when they see something or taste something really delicious, right? So he said we all salivate the same, and he said that's how I judge a good wine. Basically, it just comes down to your own taste. I like this. This is good, and I want more.
So that kind of brings me to another question, and I just want a quick answer: cork or screw cap?
Both, depending.
Really? Depending on what?
So if you want a wine that you just want to enjoy right away, which is most people, studies show that most people, they pick up a wine, they consume it within 48 hours. Boom. There you go. Screw cap. Great. Perfect. You're not going to get a corked wine. But if you're a wine connoisseur, you love to age your wine forever in your cellar, you like the way it evolves after years. It goes through the earthy stage, it goes through the tobacco and funky animal stages and all that, and you want to smoke a big fat cigar with that after 20 years. Then you want a cork.
I see. A screw cap wine should not be frowned upon, though.
No, I don't think so. Because, you're getting a fresh wine that's, I recommend screw cap wines for people who don't want their wine to evolve too much. You know what I mean? They still want to keep those fruit flavors and that freshness. And that's what, the reason for a cork is, and they make screw caps these days too that do this, but the cork allows just minute amounts of oxygen, just enough to oxidize that wine very slowly over the years and change the flavor profile. So it's just a way to prevent the wine from being corked. A good thing about screw caps is that you don't have to place the wine on its side and keep a cork wet because there's no cork. So
we talk about letting a wine breathe. So when you uncork a wine, assuming it has a cork and not a screw cap, you take the cork out and you let it breathe. What exactly is happening there?
Well, basically you're letting it oxidize a little bit more and mellow out.
Okay.
So in the case of a young wine, you have a decanter. People decant their wines, big wide bowl decanters, and you let that, young wines really need to kind of settle down, soften up the tannins a little bit before you enjoy them. And it's up to you. You can try it. It's ready, it's not ready. I never recommend doing that with vintage wines, however, because you could actually kill a vintage wine if you let it sit out like that. I just pour my wine in the glass and I let it, if it's a young wine, I'll just taste from time to time and decide when it's ready to drink.
You can notice over the period of 15 minutes or something, as you're sipping it, the flavor will change?
Well, the tannins will soften up. Yeah, the fruit comes out a little bit more. It's what we call tight in the beginning. And what you want to do is kind of soften it and warm it. What I mean is warm the flavors, not actually warm the wine. You don't want the wine too warm. As a matter of fact, people are under the impression that they should serve red wine at room temperature, and no, it should be slightly chilled. So it should not be at room temperature. It shouldn't be over the top cold, and it also should not be room temperature. But yeah, you can be the judge of that yourself. Say, wow, the fruits really come out. The tannins are really smooth and velvety. It's perfect to drink right now.
Interesting. Going back for a minute to the grocery store selection of wines. I've asked a few people before this interview. I've asked some common folk who are not wine connoisseurs, but enjoy a glass of wine, including my mom. But she gets hers from a box.
Boxed wine. Hey, don't knock it. You can keep it in the fridge for weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't oxidize because the bag is really nice. So yeah, if you want an everyday drink, a good everyday drinker that you don't have to, you open a bottle, you got to finish it off, But with boxed wines, you can keep them for a longer time because the bag is nice, doesn't oxidize. Yeah.
Okay.
Good on your mom. She's got a great everyday drinker.
I'll stop rolling my eyes when she says she just picked up another box of wine.
Hey, I buy boxed sangria, so because in the summer I can, I can
it's ready to go.
It's ready to go.
So, generally the people that I asked, besides my mom, who's set on the boxed wines, they look at the label, they look at the price.
Yeah.
So
mostly.
Now, what about years? When you look at the year on a wine, like, okay, this is a 2007 Merlot or whatever. If you are not knowledgeable about that year's production, like maybe it was a bad year for the grapes or something, who would know other than Google? I guess Google is your friend in that case.
Yeah, it's your friend. There's all sorts of charts of the good years in Bordeaux and the bad years in Bordeaux, which is, it basically, if you're armed with that knowledge going in, that's great. Most everyday people aren't. I know the good years in Napa, and Napa, it's kind of strange. They like to say bad years, but there's really no bad years because we have such moderate weather here. We've had problems with fires, but people don't tend to make wine if they've got smoke taint, or bottle it if they've got smoke taint. So that's all subjective too. For example, in Napa, 2011 was considered what they call a bad year, but it's one of my favorite years because it was cold. It was cold throughout the year. What happens when it's cold is you don't get this big, bold cab because the heat, increases the alcohol and you get all those big tannins and everything. Instead, you get more of a Bordeaux style cab,
Okay.
A lot of what we call pyrazines, which is a kind of a light greenness in the wine. I absolutely love the 2011 vintages here, and you can get them for a bargain, because people thought it was a bad year.
Right. So related to that with the years, we see a big variation in prices for bottles of wine. And I'm assuming that price is related to the volume of wine they were able to produce that year. Is that why the price goes up, or is it because their production costs, or what is the reasoning?
You got that exactly right.
Increase?
Yeah, it's production. Yeah, if you have a low production wine, you only made 200 cases, it's going to be a pretty pricey wine. If you made 150,000 cases, it's going to be a lot cheaper.
I see.
In the world of champagne, for example, and here's where a lot of people get confused about champagne. Champagne is mostly non-vintage. So non-vintage is what you find in the store. There's no vintage date on it. Yeah, they buy a bottle of champagne in the store and they say, I'm going to pull this out for my son or daughter's 21st birthday to celebrate, And if it's a non-vintage, that means it's going to be vinegar by the time But so you need to have a year on there to be able to age it. Because a non-vintage is a blend of different vintages. They do that in champagne to make the style the same every year. There's a certain taste profile that they want to keep. But when they have a really great vintage year, they'll make a vintage champagne, and then the price goes way up.
What's the most expensive bottle of champagne you've had?
I think a Paul Roger Winston Churchill 2004. Maybe it's the most expensive.
Can you get that at Trader Joe's?
Trying to think. Jacques Salos, I had Jacques. So I didn't pay for that, and I didn't. And Jacques Salos up in Champagne, I went to that. That's the most expensive one I've had.
Like
the wrap
$1,000 a
industry
bottle or
saved
something?
cognac.
Wrap industry what? Go ahead.
They saved the cognac industry.
Really?
It was on a downswing because people in France, except for old men, weren't drinking it. And then the wrap industry came along and saved it.
Oh, nice.
And I think it's the same for champagne, I think they did a lot for the champagne industry as well. I love champagne. I like the drier styles, extra brut or brut nature, which is 0 sugar. But what you get typically here in the U.S. is brut, so it's got a little bit of sugar, a little bit of a dosage, so it's a little snappy and acidic. Yeah, I'm quite fond of the, in Napa, you find that there's a lot of sparkling here. We can't call it champagne because we're not in the Champagne region, but most of them are owned by the big champagne houses in France. Mumm and Carneros is Taittinger, but there is one here in Napa. There's one sparkling producer that's actually 100% American, and they are the only ones that really use the champagne method to make their wine. And it's fabulous. It's my favorite. And on the price point, it's called Schramsberg.
So they make it in the traditional champagne way, but because they're not in France, they can't actually use that name as champagne. That's correct?
That's right. Yeah. Although there is a champagne, a place that calls their product champagne, and that's Corbel, and there's a little bit of a yeah. You can't call a red wine a Bordeaux here either. In fact, they created a name for those kind of wines here in California called Meritage, but most wineries don't really use that. They just say a red wine blend, because you can't call it a Bordeaux.
Right.
Do you have a favorite wine, Peter?
Like Night Train or something
Turning
like that?
the interview around on you. Night Train, yeah. Let's see if it exist.
Well, actually, I before I answer that loaded question, fortified wine. What exactly is a fortified wine?
A fortified wine is a dessert wine. Yeah, it's just basically fortified with in the case of port, it's brandy, or some kind of distilled alcohol. Yeah, so they're higher in alcohol.
So they're adding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're sweet.
So, in answer to your question, my favorite wine, I won't say it's my favorite, but one that I had that left an impression was I believe it's a Napa Valley wine. It's called Brown. Are you familiar with that?
Brown Estate, yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Oregon.
Yeah.
I'm from Oregon, and Oregon wines have started to show up on the map. Do you have any opinion on Northern Californian wines versus Southern Oregon wines? Is there a noticeable difference, or is there a particular wine that's grown in Oregon that a wine connoisseur gravitates towards?
I'd say Pinot Noir, hands down. The Pinot Noirs from Oregon are fabulous. They are like those in Burgundy, which is, king. My personal opinion is California doesn't do Pinot Noir as well as Oregon does. I really like the Oregon Pinot Noirs.
Sure.
Don't play this to anybody in California. I'm going to get in trouble.
All right, I'll set the parameters.
Yeah. People in California have a different impression of Pinot. They think the California style of Pinot is Pinot Noir, but it's not. It's a little, the Pinot Noirs in California are quite heavy in comparison. A good Pinot, like the ones in Oregon, should have very light red fruit, strawberry flavors, things like that, not these intense. Some of these Pinots in California almost mimic a cab, because we have the hotter weather here and everything like that. So yeah.
Right.
Pinot Noir in Oregon, top class. Love it.
Well, Vicki, I want to thank you.
Thank you
for joining the podcast. You are a wealth of knowledge and a real sport. We had a bit of a late start today, And I have learned a lot, and I have a lot more questions. So I hope you will come back on the show again very soon and share your knowledge and your charm with us.
I'd love to. And maybe we could share a glass. Could talk about what we're drinking and see.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Get some conversation and edumacation going, and let's get the same bottle. We can both get the exact same bottle. Sounds
great. This sounds like a thing.
Well, thank you. It sounds like a thing. There you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Serial Talker podcast. More coming up, more true stories on the way. If you have a compelling true story that you would like me to consider reading, send it on and I'll take a look. You can find the email address in the description. And as always, thank you for your support. If you like this kind of program and would like to support it, you can always buy me a cup of coffee. The details are in the description of this podcast. Or you can buy me a glass of wine. We'll see you guys very soon. Ciao.